The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning. Formal and cream-colored, the kind that suggested someone still believed in proper correspondence. June Hartwell held it up to the kitchen window light in her Asheville home. Reading the return address, Charleston College Alumni Association. "Well, I'll be damned," she muttered, reaching for her reading glasses, the ones she swore she only needed for really small print. At 78, June had cultivated what her late husband Frank used to call dignified stubbornness. Her silver hair was cut in a practical bob, and she still wore the same style of cotton blouses she'd favored since the Carter administration. She slid open the envelope and read, "You are cordially invited to the 60th reunion of the Charleston College class of 1965. June 14 to 16, 2025. Join us for a weekend, celebrating friendship, memories, and the journey we've shared. 60 years. Lord have mercy. 60 years since she'd walked across that stage. In an ill-fitting cap and gown, history degree in hand, ready to change the world. Back when her knees didn't crack like Rice Krispies, and she could stay awake past 9 o'clock without a fight." June set the invitation beside her pill organizer, that cheerful reminder of mortality, and picked up her phone. She scrolled to M and called. "Hello?" Millie's voice was bright as Sunday morning. "Did you get the Charleston invitation?" "Just opened it. 60 years, June. Can you even believe it?" Millie Foster had been June's freshman roommate and remained her closest friend through 6 decades of life's complications. Now 78 and still directing the First Baptist Choir in Athens, Georgia, Millie maintained the same honey blonde bouffant she'd perfected in 1963. "Are you thinking what I'm thinking?" Millie asked conspiratorially. "That we're too old for reunions? That we should go. And not just us, let's call the boys. Make it a road trip like the old days." June's mind immediately went to Leroy Washington and Hank Peterson, the other 2 members of their college quartet. Leroy had run his own auto shop in Atlanta for 40 years before retiring. Hank had bounced through various business ventures, some successful, most amusing failures, but had never lost his talent for finding trouble. "Millie, we're almost 80. So? We're not dead. Come on, when's the last time you did something exciting?" June looked around her tidy kitchen, thought about her routine: coffee at 6, crossword at 7, garden before noon, reading in the afternoon, news at 6, bed by 9. Safe. Predictable. Boring. "We could fly," June suggested weakly. "Or we could drive. See the countryside, stop at weird roadside places, and act like we're 21 again. I'm calling Hank and Leroy. We're doing this." Before June could protest, Millie had hung up. June stared at her phone, then at the invitation, then at her orderly kitchen. A road trip. At their age. With those 3 lunatics. She found herself smiling. "What the hell," she said to nobody. "Let's do it." 2 days later, June stood in her driveway, watching a silver minivan roll up like a parade float. It was plastered with bumper stickers that said, "My grandson made honor roll. I'd rather be fishing," and inexplicably, "honk if you love accordions." Hank Peterson emerged from the driver's seat, grinning wide. At 78, he'd kept his hair now completely white, which June found deeply unfair. He wore khaki shorts, a Hawaiian shirt, visible from orbit, and the boldest fashion crime of all, sandals with socks. June Hartwell. Still beautiful as a spring morning. Still full of it, Hank, June replied, accepting his hug. He smelled like Old Spice and peppermint candies, same as always. Leroy Washington unfolded from the passenger seat, slower. Now, leaning on a cane. His close-cropped white hair and distinguished bearing hadn't changed. But arthritis had made movement careful, deliberate. "Don't even start with the worried look," Leroy warned June. "I'm fine." "I wasn't." "Yes, you were. Millie tumbled from the back in pink velour. And enough jewelry to stock a boutique. Isn't this exciting? We're kids again. Kids with arthritis and early bird specials, June said dryly. Speaking of which, Hank rubbed his hands together. We should hit the road. I've mapped the whole route: back roads, scenic views, the real South. The interstate is faster, Leroy noted patiently. Faster isn't better. This is about the journey, the experience. The getting lost, Leroy muttered. June walked around to inspect the van. The cargo area was stuffed to bursting. Through the window, she spotted what looked like a garden gnome. Wearing a tiny Charleston college sweatshirt. Hank, is that Dean Patterson's gnome? Well, a replica. I call him Dean Jr. Thought we'd photograph him at landmarks. You know, like those people with traveling flamingos. Those people are weird. Those people are fun. June, after much debate about seating. Millie claimed the front passenger seat by faking carsickness. June settled into a middle captain's chair, leaving the other for Leroy. Their luggage had been reorganized twice, and Dean Jr. was secured on the dashboard in a position of honor. Everyone buckled? Hank asked. Affirmatives all around. Snacks? Millie patted an enormous tote. Check. Medications? Check, said June and Leroy together. Sense of adventure? Silence. I said, sense of adventure? Check, they yelled, June rolling her eyes. Then let's roll. The engine started, and 1960s music poured from the speakers. A playlist Hank had apparently curated for the occasion. As they pulled away from June's quiet street, the Supremes singing, Stop. In the name of love, June felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Possibly, this is either brilliant, she said, or we'll end up in a ditch somewhere. Why not both? Hank said cheerfully. As Asheville disappeared in the rearview mirror, June watched the familiar streets give way to highway, then rolling hills. The four of them talked and laughed, falling into comfortable rhythms. Millie gossiping about her church. Choir drama, Leroy showing photos of a '67 Mustang restoration. Hank telling an elaborate story about accidentally joining a senior yoga class. Got stuck in downward dog, Hank said. Literally stuck. They had to call the instructor to help me up. That's saying something, June noted. Considering you once got your head stuck in the library stair railing. I was trying to see if Mary Ann Patterson was studying below. You were spying on the dean's daughter, Leroy corrected. Research, Hank insisted. An hour into Georgia, Hank suddenly took an exit that seemed to lead nowhere. Hank? June leaned forward. Why are we leaving the highway? Scenic route. Trust me, this is how you see the real South. My GPS says stay on I-85, Leroy noted. Your GPS is boring. They wound through pine forests and clearings where old farmhouses fought, losing battles against kudzu. Hand-painted signs advertised boiled peanuts and fresh peaches. Eventually, they reached a tiny town, more of a wide spot in the road featuring a gas station, a Dollar General, and a diner with a sign reading, Dottie's Diner. Best pecan pie in Georgia. Perfect. Hank pulled into the gravel lot. Coffee break. We had coffee an hour ago, June protested. We're old, June, we need to stay regular. Millie giggled. He's not wrong. Inside, Dottie's was exactly what June expected: red vinyl booths, a long counter, laminated menus, and a waitress who'd clearly been pouring coffee since Eisenhower. Her name tag said, Wanda. Sit anywhere, Wanda called without looking up. They claimed a corner booth and ordered coffee and pie. When the slices arrived, enormous wedges that could feed small families. They ate in appreciative silence. Okay, June admitted, this detour was worth it. An elderly man in overalls and a John Deere cap approached from the counter. Couldn't help overhearing about your reunion. Name's Earl Hutchins. They introduced themselves, and Earl pulled up a chair without asking. 60 years, that's something. Never been to my reunions, wife passed away, and kids moved away. Everyone either moved on, if you catch my meaning. The table fell quiet, understanding his euphemism. That's why we're going, June said gently. While we still can. Earl smiled. Smart. If you don't mind advice from an old postal worker. Or don't spend the whole trip looking backward. You're making new memories right now. That's the important part. After paying, Wanda refused to split checks, declaring she wasn't running an accounting firm. They said goodbye to Earl and climbed back into the van. Nice guy, Leroy said. Really nice, Millie agreed. Did you see his wedding ring? Still wearing it. They continued south, singing along to the Temptations. Admiring a particularly photogenic barn. Listening to Hank tell a joke about a penguin that didn't quite land but made them laugh anyway. Then chaos erupted. Millie's phone started emitting a strange humming. Sound her church choir practice app playing tonal warm-ups. How do I turn this off? She frantically pressed buttons. The humming grew louder, joined by a full virtual choir. Singing, Amazing Grace, in a key suggesting recent demonic possession. Millie, please, Hank started. I'm trying. Leroy reached for the phone. Just as Hank's GPS announced, turn left in 500 feet. I'm not turning left, Hank told the phone. Turn left in 300 feet. No. Turn left in 100 feet. I said no. The GPS fell silent, apparently offended. Then Leroy accidentally leaned against his mobility scooter horn in the back, setting off a loud beep like an angry duck. They passed a farm where geese gathered near the road. The honking horn triggered them into territorial fury, the whole flock. Racing alongside the van, wings flapping, voices raised in indignant challenge. What did you do? Hank yelled over the cacophony of hymns, GPS directions, scooter horn, and outraged waterfowl. I don't know. Turn left now. Recalculating. Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound. Beep. Honk honk honk. June, laughing helplessly, reached over and silenced the scooter horn. Millie finally killed her app. The GPS gave up. The geese, having defended their territory, fell behind. Silence filled the van except for their heavy breathing. Well, Hank finally said, that was exciting. They exploded into laughter, deep, helpless, stomach-hurting laughter. June couldn't remember the last time she'd laughed this hard. It felt wonderful. Okay, she gasped, maybe this road trip wasn't completely terrible. Told you, Hank said smugly. Adventure. If you like the story, can I ask you to subscribe and like the video? They drove on through the Georgia afternoon, sun painting everything gold. They stopped at a peach stand, bought fruit tasting like sunshine. They photographed Dean Jr. at a historical marker. They debated the Civil War's proper name. June won with her history degree. That evening, they checked into a Holiday Inn Express outside Augusta. Clean, affordable, with breakfast included perfection. In her room, after her elaborate medication ritual, June stood at the window, looking at their van in the parking lot, Dean Jr. visible on the dashboard, even from the third floor. Her phone buzzed, 4 of them. At the diner, laughing over pie. Day 1 was perfect. Can't wait for tomorrow. June smiled, sent back a thumbs up, and climbed into bed. Tomorrow they'd continue toward Charleston. Toward their past, toward whatever waited. Tonight, she fell asleep smiling, feeling more alive than she had in years. Chapter 2: Sweet Tea and Detours. They managed 45 miles the next morning before Hank saw the sign. World's biggest sweet tea, only 3 miles, he read with childlike enthusiasm. We have to stop. Hank, June said patiently, we left an hour ago. We need to make actual progress. But it's the world's biggest. It's a tourist trap, Leroy said, not looking up from his Western paperback. All the best things are tourist traps, Hank countered. The Grand Canyon? Tourist trap. Statue of Liberty? Tourist trap. We're not going to Kansas to see a ball of string, June said firmly. More's the pity. But Millie had already Googled it. Oh my goodness, it's real. She showed them a photo of a 12-foot mason jar. Painted brown with a giant straw. That's the stupidest thing I've ever seen, June said. Exactly. Hank grinned. We're going. 15 minutes later, June stood before the world's biggest sweet tea. Shaking her head even as she smiled. It was exactly as advertised. A massive fiberglass mason jar in a gas station parking lot. This is ridiculous. This is amazing, Hank corrected, positioning himself for selfies. Everyone in frame. A young couple with a baby. Watched, amused by 4 elderly people acting like teenagers. Want me to take one with all of you? The woman offered. Would you? Thank you, sweetie, Millie said. They posed together, Hank making bunny ears behind June. Until she swatted him with Dean Jr. Positioned prominently. The resulting photo was gloriously absurd. Christmas card material, Hank declared. You don't send Christmas cards, Leroy reminded him. I'll start. This photo demands to be shared. Inside the gift shop, they browsed tchotchkes. Millie bought a tea towel with a sweet tea recipe. 4 cups sugar to 1 cup tea, that's diabetes in a glass, June noted. Hank found a bumper sticker saying, I got sweet on you in South Carolina. June wandered to a postcard rack. Finding images of Charleston buildings unchanged from her memories. She picked up one showing the college campus. Getting nostalgic? Leroy appeared beside her. Maybe a little. I haven't been back since graduation. You? Once, maybe 20 years ago. Vacationing with Evelyn in Myrtle Beach, we swung by Charleston. He paused. I never told her much about college. About y'all. About what we did. Why not? Leroy shrugged. Wanted to keep it separate, I guess. My life then and my life with her. June understood. She'd done the same with Frank. We're getting a second chance, June said quietly. To remember who we were. Or figure out who we are now, Leroy added. Not always the same people. They have fried gizzards. Hank's voice boomed across the store. Hard pass, Millie called back. Back on the road, fortified by questionable fried snacks, they continued south. Hank had agreed to take a more direct route, actual highway for a stretch. Though he still pointed out every interesting exit. Valdosta, home of. Something interesting, I bet. Keep driving, June ordered. There's a town called Enigma. Hank. Fine. Lunch ended up in Sylvania at Big Jim's Barbecue, chosen because Leroy insisted it had 5 Google stars. The place lived up to its reputation. Smoke visible 3 blocks away. Menu photocopied circa 1987, food spectacular. Their waitress, Tammy, was warm and talkative. Y'all passing through? College reunion in Charleston, Millie said. 60th. Well, isn't that something? Y'all seeing old flames, maybe? She smiled teasingly. June felt her cheeks warm. Doubt it. But Millie leaned in conspiratorially. Actually, June had a serious boyfriend senior year. Peter Mitchell. They practically. We dated 8 months, June interrupted. That's all. You gave him your class ring. To hold during graduation. Hank perked up. Peter Mitchell. Didn't he become a professor? English professor at University of South Carolina, June admitted. Last I heard. Years ago. You should look him up. Millie said. That would be weird. Why? You're both single. I've been widowed 3 years. I'm not dating. Who said dating? Just saying hello. Tammy returned with drinks, having overheard. Honey, there's nothing wrong with reconnecting. Life's too short to worry about weirdness. Thank you, Millie said triumphantly. However, Tammy continued, if you do see this. Peter, don't mention the relationship right away. Let him bring it up. Otherwise you seem eager. I'm not eager, June protested. Course not. But hypothetically that's my advice. She winked. The food was spectacular. As they ate, Leroy spoke softly. Evelyn used to make ribs almost this good. Had a secret ingredient she never told anyone. Took it to her grave. Did you ever figure it out? Millie asked gently. Nope. He smiled sadly. She'd have liked this trip. Always said I should keep in better touch with y'all. Why didn't you? June asked. Life, I guess. Kids, work, the shop. By the time you look up, 40 years have passed. He paused. Then you're old and wondering where the time went. Then we're here now, Hank said quietly. That's what matters. Millie raised her plastic cup. To us still kicking, still friends, still trouble. They clinked cups, and June felt grateful for this moment. These people, this journey. The afternoon brought them into South Carolina landscape. Shifting from pine to lowland swamp, air growing heavier. They crossed rivers the color of sweet tea. And passed through towns with names like Walterboro and Yamasee. Should think about tonight's accommodations, Leroy suggested. 2 hours from Charleston. Let's get closer, Hank said. Maybe the historic district. That's expensive, June noted. When's the next time we do this? Might as well splurge. They compromised on a B&B outside Beaufort, the Magnolia House. A restored antebellum home with wraparound porch and hanging ferns. Patricia, their host, greeted them warmly. Y'all are my last guests before renovations. Fresh lemonade on the porch, cookies in the parlor. The rooms were beautiful antiques, 4 poster beds. June's overlooked a garden where azaleas bloomed. She stood at the window, watching late afternoon light filter through Spanish moss. A knock revealed Millie, changed into evening casual. A floral dress and sandals. Walk into town? Patricia says there's a lovely waterfront. They found the boys on the porch, and together walked toward downtown Beaufort. The town was picture-perfect, historic homes. Charming shops, carefully preserved beauty. At the waterfront park, they found a bench. Facing the water and sat to watch the sunset. Families played, couples walked dogs, teenagers clustered in groups. This is nice, Leroy said simply. Very nice, June agreed. After comfortable silence, Millie spoke. Can I ask something? Are you scared? About the reunion? Scared of what? Hank scoffed. Seeing how much everyone aged. Realizing how much time passed. Facing things we didn't do. Leroy answered slowly, I'm more scared of not going. Of missing this chance. But what if it's disappointing? Millie pressed. What if everyone's boring? Then we'll still have each other, June said firmly. And this trip. Nobody can take that away. Hank pulled out his phone. Group photo. Right here, right now. They huddled on the bench, water sparkling behind them. Hank set the timer, propped the phone, hurried back. Say cheese. Cheese. Wind blew Millie's dress up slightly, making her squeal. Setting them all laughing. The photo captured chaos and joy, not perfect, but real. That evening at the Magnolia House. They sat on the porch drinking Patricia's sweet tea, watching stars emerge. Tomorrow we'll be in Charleston, June said. Tomorrow we face the past, Leroy added. Tomorrow we prove we're alive, Hank declared. Tomorrow we check if they still have peach cobbler. In the dining hall, Millie said practically. Laughter carried into the soft southern night. 4 old friends on the edge of something that felt like both ending and beginning. They should have known something would go wrong. Road trips with this group never went smoothly, not in 1964. Certainly not in 2025. So when the minivan started making a concerning knocking sound, 40 miles from Charleston, it was almost expected. What's that noise? Millie looked up from her phone. What noise? Hank said unconvincingly. That noise, June said flatly. The one where your engine's trying to escape. Leroy had his eyes closed. Head tilted in the universal mechanics listening posture. Pull over. Now. Hank guided the van to the shoulder. The moment he cut the engine, steam rose from the hood like they'd driven through dragon territory. "That's not good," Hank stated the obvious. They climbed out, gathering around as Leroy popped the hood. More steam billowed, forcing them back. "Overheated," Leroy diagnosed once it cleared. "Radiator hose has a leak. Radiator itself might be cracked." "Can you fix it?" Millie asked. "Not roadside. Need a shop and coolant minimum." June checked her phone. 1 bar. "Great. Middle of nowhere, no service." "Sign back there mentioned a town," Hank pointed. "Can't be more than 2 miles. "I'm not walking 2 miles in this heat," Millie said firmly. "I'll literally die. We could call a tow." "With what service?" Hank waved his phone showing, "No service." Leroy was already heading to the van's rear. "We're not walking. Help me with my scooter." 5 minutes of effort later, Leroy's mobility scooter sat assembled roadside beige, institutional tan, with an orange safety flag. He climbed aboard, started the motor. "I'll scout ahead for help." "You can't drive that on the highway," June protested. "Watch me." And he was off, top speed of 8 miles per hour. Carrying him steadily down the road, orange flag fluttering. "He'll get himself killed," June muttered. "He'll be fine," Hank said, unconvinced. Leroy's survived worse. They waited 3 seniors and a gnome watching their friend disappear around a curve. Cars passed, some slowing to gawk, none stopping. "This is like a horror movie," Millie said, sitting on the bumper. "Every horror movie," June agreed. "We're living a horror movie." "We're living a minor inconvenience," June corrected. "Though if Leroy doesn't return soon, I'll upgrade it to moderate." 20 minutes later, just as worry set in, an engine approached. Not Leroy's scooter, but a primer gray pickup, making almost as much noise as their van. It pulled over, and a young man climbed out. Weathered from outdoor work, tanned, sun-bleached hair, muscled arms. His shirt advertised, "Harper's Garage, we fix what your husband fixed." "Y'all the ones Leroy sent me for?" Thick, friendly accent. "That's us," Hank said. "Is he okay?" "Fine. Having sweet tea with my grandma." Said radiator trouble? He peered under the hood, making clicking sounds. "Yep. Done for. Hose too. I can fix it, but not here." "How far's your shop?" June asked. 3 miles. "I can tow you." "Cost?" June calculated their budget. He looked surprised. "Tow's free, ma'am. We don't charge to help. Parts and labor's different, but I'll be fair." His name tag read, Kyle. 45 minutes later, efficiently towed to Harper's Garage. They found themselves in Harlow, Georgia, population 1,247. Main Street consisted of the garage, a Dollar General, Rosie's Diner, and a Civil War-era post office. Leroy sat in a lawn chair outside, sipping tea from a mason jar. Chatting with a tiny elderly woman, Kyle's grandmother. Under 5 feet tall, improbable auburn hair, worn floral house dress. "There they are," Leroy called. "Mrs. Harper's been keeping me company. These are the miscreants June, Millie, Hank. Mrs. Harper. Call me Betty." They shook hands with surprising grip. "Any friends of Leroy's are my friends also." "Kyle's checking your vehicle. Want tea?" They did. Betty returned with mason jars of sweet tea, somehow better than any they'd had. "What's your secret?" Millie asked. "Honey. Most folks use too much sugar. Honey's the way. Plus a pinch of baking soda to cut bitterness." They settled into lawn chairs outside the bay where Kyle worked. Afternoon sun was hot, but breeze made it bearable. Something peaceful, timeless, about this small town. World, moving at slower pace. "Headed to a reunion?" Betty asked. "Charleston College," Millie said. 60th. 60 years. Lord have mercy. Y'all must have stories. "A few," Hank said with his trademark grin. Kyle emerged, wiping hands on a rag. "Good news and bad news." Radiators definitely cracked, need a new one. Bad news, I don't have that model in stock. Good news, I can get one delivered tomorrow morning. Have you back on the road by noon? Tomorrow? June's heart sank. The reunion starts tomorrow evening. I know it's not ideal, Kyle said apologetically. But I'll work fast as I can. They looked at each other, then Leroy spoke, not much choice. Let's make the best of it. Y'all need a place to stay? Betty asked. My house has 2 spare rooms. Not fancy, but clean. We couldn't impose, June started. Nonsense. Can't have friends of Leroy's sleeping in their van. It's settled. And it was. Within an hour, they'd been installed in Betty's modest house. 3 blocks from the garage. A tidy home filled with photographs, quilts, and the smell of something delicious baking. Made a casserole earlier, Betty said. Y'all are staying for dinner, no arguments. As the sun set over Harlow, they found themselves sitting at Betty's dining table, a table that had clearly hosted decades of family meals, eating chicken and dumplings that tasted like childhood and comfort. Kyle joined them, along with his wife Sarah and their 2 kids. Emma 7 and Jackson 5. The children were fascinated by the old people from far away, asking endless questions about what it was like when dinosaurs were alive. We're not that old, Hank protested, mock offended. Are you older than me, Ma? Emma asked. Betty laughed. I'm 72, baby. They've got a few years on me. Wow, Jackson breathed, impressed. After dinner, neighbors started appearing apparently. Word had spread about the stranded travelers. They brought pie, cookies, more sweet tea. Betty's small living room, filled with people eager to hear stories and share their own. An elderly man named Curtis, probably in his 80s, had fought in Korea. A middle-aged woman named Rachel ran the local library and peppered June with questions about being a history major. A young couple, barely out of their teens, were expecting their first baby and wanted advice. Don't worry so much, Millie told them gently. Babies are tougher than you think. And parenthood is harder than you think, Leroy added. But worth every minute. As the evening wore on, Hank pulled out his ukulele, which apparently had been packed for a reason, and started playing. His voice, still surprisingly strong, led them through You Are My Sunshine, Blue Moon, Stand By Me. Others joined in. Millie's trained choir voice provided harmony. Kyle's father appeared with a harmonica. Soon Betty's living room was filled with music and laughter. 4 strangers and a dozen townsfolk singing like they'd known each other forever. June, sitting on Betty's worn couch, looked around the room, Leroy telling Jackson about restoring old cars, the boy's eyes wide with fascination. Millie holding Rachel's newborn while the young mother ate with both hands for probably the first time in weeks. Hank teaching Emma a simple ukulele chord, her small fingers struggling to make the shape. This wasn't part of the plan. This was supposed to be a quick drive to Charleston. A weekend of nostalgia, then home. Instead, here they were in a town they'd never heard of, surrounded by people they'd just met, feeling more connected than June had felt in years. You okay? Betty sat beside her, following June's gaze. Just thinking how funny life is. We broke down trying to get somewhere. And maybe we ended up exactly where we needed to be. Betty patted her hand. That's how it works sometimes. The detours are where the real journey happens. Later, lying in Betty's guest bed, a 4-poster that had probably been in the family for generations, June couldn't sleep. She could hear Millie's soft snoring from the other bed. The house, settling around them, night sounds of a small southern town. Her phone buzzed. A text from Hank, in the other guest room, best breakdown I ever had. Leroy responded from Kyle's couch where he'd insisted on sleeping. Told you that radiator was going. Millie, apparently not as asleep as her snoring suggested, this was perfect. All of it. June smiled in the darkness, typing, "See you tomorrow, troublemakers." Tomorrow they'd get back on the road. Tomorrow they'd make it to Charleston, to their reunion, to whatever waited. But tonight, they were exactly where they belonged. Kyle was true to his word. By 10 o'clock the next morning, he had the new radiator installed and tested. The van ran smoothly, steam-free, ready for the final leg to Charleston. Betty had insisted on making them breakfast: eggs, grits, bacon, biscuits with honey butter. She'd also packed a cooler with sandwiches, for the road, and made them promise to stop by on their way back home. "Y'all have been a blessing," she said, hugging each of them. "Don't be strangers now." "We won't," Millie promised, tears in her eyes. Kyle refused payment for the tow. "Already made that clear. The parts and labor's fair, that's all I'm taking." As they pulled away from Harlow, the whole town seemed to turn out, Betty waving from her porch. Kyle and his family in the garage doorway, Curtis standing by the post office. Rachel at the library window. June felt a lump in her throat. "Small towns," Hank said softly. "Still got something special." "They really do," June agreed. The final stretch to Charleston passed quickly. As they crossed into the city limits, seeing the historic architecture rise around them, June felt her stomach flutter. 60 years. They were really doing this. "Everyone remember where we're staying?" Hank asked. "The Francis Marion Hotel," Leroy read from his phone. "Right downtown." "Fancy," Millie said approvingly. The hotel was indeed fancy, a historic property that had clearly catered to Charleston society since the 1920s. Their rooms were on the 5th floor, overlooking King Street. "The reunion welcome reception starts at 6. Millie announced, checking her schedule. "That gives us 3 hours. 3 hours to make ourselves presentable," June said, looking in the mirror. After 3 days of road tripping, her hair needed work. 3 hours to mentally prepare, Leroy added. 3 hours to panic, Hank said cheerfully. They separated to their rooms with plans to meet in the lobby at 5:45. June showered, debated her wardrobe for an embarrassing length of time. Finally settling on navy slacks and a cream blouse, casual but pulled together. She'd brought her pearl earrings. The ones Frank had given her for their 30th anniversary. At 5:45, she stepped off the elevator to find her 3 friends already waiting. Millie looked lovely in a floral dress. Leroy wore slacks and a button-down that made him look distinguished. Hank had somehow found a jacket that matched his Hawaiian shirt. "Ready?" June asked. "Absolutely not," Millie said. "But let's go anyway." The reunion was being held at the Alumni Center, a building that hadn't existed when they were students. As they approached, June could hear music and conversation spilling out into the warm evening. A sign by the door read, "Welcome Class of 1965 60th Reunion." They paused at the threshold. "Last chance to run," Hank said. "We drove 400 miles, Leroy pointed out. Little late for running. Besides," June said, straightening her shoulders, "we're not running from anything. We're walking towards something. Together." And they did. Through the door, into a room full of strangers who had once been classmates. Into a sea of silver hair and walking canes and faces lined with living. At first, it was overwhelming. June didn't recognize anyone. These elderly people couldn't be her classmates. The young men and women she'd known when they were all smooth-skinned and full of dreams. Then a woman approached, tall, still elegant, with silver hair and bright blue eyes. "June? June Hartwell?" "Yes? It's Margaret. Margaret Simmons. We had American history together with Professor Coleman." And suddenly June could see it, the 19-year-old girl inside the 78-year-old woman. Margaret, my God. They hugged, and just like that, the ice broke. More people approached, tentative at first, then warming. Faces became familiar once you looked past the wrinkles. Voices triggered memories. Leroy Washington, I heard you opened your own shop. Millie Foster, you're still singing. Hank Peterson, you haven't changed a bit. I've changed considerably, Hank protested. I have much less hair. The evening unfolded in a pleasant blur. There was food, country boil, crab soup, shrimp and grits. There was music, a DJ, playing songs from their era. There was a slideshow of old photographs that made everyone laugh and groan. At their younger selves, June found herself in conversation with people she hadn't thought about in decades. Robert Chen, who'd gone on to become a surgeon. Linda Martinez, who'd taught high school English for 40 years. David Okafor, who'd started 3 businesses and retired to write mystery novels. All of them with stories, with lives fully lived, with losses and triumphs and ordinary moments that added up to extraordinary existences. And then, across the room, June saw him. Peter Mitchell stood by the refreshment table, looking distinguished, in the way some men did at this age, white hair, good posture, kind face. He was laughing at something another man had said, and June felt a jolt of recognition so strong it took her breath. That's him, Millie whispered, appearing at her elbow. Go talk to him. I can't just. Yes, you can. Go. Before June could overthink it, she walked across the room. Peter was alone now, reading the placard about scholarship donations. Peter Mitchell? He turned, and for a moment, she saw him not recognize her. Then his face transformed with surprised pleasure. June? June Hartwell. I'd recognize that no-nonsense tone anywhere. They laughed, and it felt natural, easy, like 60 years had fallen away. You look wonderful, he said. You're a terrible liar, she replied, but thank you. I'm serious. You look, he paused, searching for words, like yourself. Does that make sense? It did, actually. You too. They talked for an hour, not about the past, but about now. His wife had passed away 6 years ago from cancer. He'd retired from teaching but still guest lectured occasionally. He lived in Colombia with his daughter's family, helped raise his grandchildren, spent time gardening. Do you remember, he said eventually, that night we tried to sneak onto the roof of the library? We didn't try, June corrected. We succeeded, and spent 2 hours up there talking about everything? Until campus security chased us down. We were so young, Peter said softly. So sure we knew how life would go. Did yours go how you expected? He considered this. No, but it went well anyway. Differently, but well. Yours? Same. Different but good. There was a comfortable silence, then Peter said, would you like to have coffee sometime? When we're both back to normal life. Just to catch up properly? June felt that flutter again, not romance necessarily, just possibility. I'd like that. Across the room, June could see her 3 friends watching. Hank gave an exaggerated thumbs up. Leroy nodded approvingly. Millie was openly crying happy tears. The formal program began at 8, welcomes from the alumni board. A video montage, awards for various achievements. Then they asked if anyone had stories to share. Hank, naturally, volunteered immediately. Class of '65, he called out, taking the microphone. I'm Hank Peterson, and let me tell you about the time we stole Dean Patterson's garden gnome. The room erupted in laughter as Hank told the story, embellishing slightly or considerably, making them all sound more daring and clever than they'd been. But it didn't matter, the story wasn't about accuracy. It was about shared memory, about being young together, about those moments that define a chapter of life. When Hank finished, Millie took the mic. I almost didn't come this weekend, she admitted. I was scared. Scared of being old, of seeing how much time had passed, of facing everything we left behind. But I'm so glad I came. Because I remembered something important. We're not just our past selves. We're everyone we've been, all at once. And that's pretty wonderful. There was applause, some tears, heads nodding in agreement. Leroy went next. My wife used to tell me to keep in touch with old friends. I didn't listen well enough. So I'm here tonight to say don't wait 60 years. Don't wait until you're old to reconnect with people who matter. Do it now, while you can. More applause, more tears. Finally, June found herself walking to the microphone, not sure what she'd say. I'm June Hartwell, she began. And 3 days ago, I was sitting in my kitchen in Asheville. Looking at my pill organizer, thinking my life was basically over. Just routine and waiting. Then my 3 ridiculous friends convinced me to take a road trip. She gestured to Hank, Leroy, and Millie. We broke down in a tiny town. We got lost. We sang terrible songs. We were chased by geese. Laughter rippled through the room. And I realized something. Life isn't over until it's over. Every day we're alive is another chance for adventure, for connection, for joy. So thank you, her voice caught slightly. Thank you all for being part of our story. For being part of tonight. For reminding me that growing old isn't the same as being old. The applause was thunderous. If you like the story, please subscribe and like the video, thank you. After the formal program ended, dancing began. A live band played not too loud. Not too fast, respecting their collective knees and hips. June danced with Peter, then with Leroy, then with several other classmates. When a slow song came on, Unchained Melody, Hank gathered their group together. One more memory, he said. All 4 of us, together. They formed a small circle on the dance floor. Moving slowly, carefully, joyfully. Around them, other groups did the same, clusters of old friends. Swaying to music from their youth, time folding in on itself. Thank you, June said softly to her 3 friends. For this. For everything. Thank you for coming along, Leroy replied. Thank you for being fun enough to come with, Millie added. Thank you for letting me bring Dean Jr., Hank said, because of course he did. They laughed, and kept dancing, and for those few minutes. They weren't 78-year-olds at a reunion. They were timeless, ageless, simply themselves, 4 friends. Who'd found each other 6 decades ago and, against all odds, found each other again. Chapter 5: The Road Home. The reunion officially ended Sunday morning with a farewell brunch. But June and her friends had decided to skip it. They'd had their closure, their reconnection, their moment. Now it was time to head home. Except Hank had other ideas. Who wants to take the coastal route back? He asked as they loaded the van. Hank, we should just take the interstate, June said. Get home at a reasonable hour. What's reasonable about being reasonable? Come on, one more adventure. They looked at each other. They should be tired. They should be ready to get home to comfortable beds and familiar routines. Oh, what the hell, Leroy said. Coastal route it is. So they drove east instead of north, heading toward the Barrier Islands. The morning was beautiful, all blue sky and warm breeze. And the promise of ocean air. They stopped in a small coastal town for lunch at a seafood shack, where the shrimp came straight from the boat. They took photos with Dean Jr. On the beach, the gnome's tiny sweatshirt, looking ridiculous and perfect against the sand. What should we do with him? Millie asked, holding up the gnome. What do you mean? Hank looked alarmed. I mean, should he stay with one of us? Or do we pass him around? Or, June interrupted, struck by sudden inspiration, we leave him somewhere. What? Think about it. We traveled together, the 5 of us, she gestured to include Dean Jr. And now we leave him somewhere new. Like those traveling gnomes people photograph around the world. Maybe someone else finds him, takes him on their adventure. They considered this. I love it, Leroy said finally. It's perfect, Millie agreed. Hank looked torn between sentimentality and practicality, then nodded. Okay. But it has to be the right place. They drove for another hour, looking for the perfect spot. Not too obvious, not too hidden. Somewhere with meaning. Finally, they found it, a small park overlooking the ocean, with a bench dedicated to a couple who'd loved this spot. The plaque read, "In memory of Walter and Rose Chen, who taught us love never ends." "Here," June said. They positioned Dean Jr. on the bench, still wearing his tiny Charleston college sweatshirt. Hank propped a small note against him, "Take me on your adventure. Share photos at #DeanJr.travels. Think anyone will find him?" Millie asked. "Someone will," Leroy said. "And they'll get to experience a little of what we experienced." They took one last photo, 4 friends and a gnome on a bench by the ocean. Then walked back to the van. As they drove away, June looked back once. Dean Jr. sat on the bench, facing the water, waiting for his next adventure. The drive home was quieter than the drive down. Comfortable, contemplative, quiet. They played softer music, Etta James, Nat King Cole, Sam Cooke. They stopped occasionally for bathroom breaks and snacks. But mostly they just drove. "So," Hank said eventually, "when should we do this again?" "Do what again?" June asked. "Road trip. Reunion. Adventure." "Hank, we just did our 60th reunion. There won't be another one for." "Who cares about official reunions? I mean us. When should the 4 of us do this again?" They were quiet, thinking about age and mortality and the uncertain future. "Next summer," Millie said firmly. "We should do this every summer. While we can." "Where would we go?" Leroy asked. "Everywhere," Hank said. "Anywhere. Doesn't matter as long as we go together." "I'm in," June heard herself say. "Me too," Leroy agreed. "Then it's settled," Millie declared. "Annual road trip. Starting next June." They shook on it, 4 hands stacked together in the center of the van, and June felt that familiar flutter of possibility. As they crossed back into North Carolina, the sun beginning to set behind them, June's phone buzzed. A text from Peter, "Safe travels. Looking forward to that coffee." She smiled, typed back, "Me too." Another text, this one from Betty in Harlow, "Just saw Dean Jr. on Facebook. Someone found him already and posted a photo. Your idea was perfect." June showed the others. The photo showed a young couple, the same couple. They'd met at the world's biggest sweet tea holding Dean Jr. with their baby. "Full circle," Leroy said softly. "Full circle," June agreed. They dropped Millie off first in Athens, helping carry her luggage to her door. She hugged each of them fiercely. "Same time next year?" "Same time next year," they promised. Leroy was next in Atlanta. He moved slower getting out of the van, arthritis acting up after 3 days of travel, but he was smiling. "This was good," he said simply. "Really good." "It was," Hank agreed. "Take care of yourselves," June said. "Both of you." "You too. See you next June." Finally, it was just June and Hank, driving the last stretch to Asheville. The sun had fully set now, stars emerging overhead. "Thank you," June said as they pulled up to her house. "For insisting on this trip. For being ridiculous and persistent and refusing to let us be sensible." "Thank you for coming along," Hank replied. "For being brave enough to say yes." She gathered her things, gave Hank a final hug, and walked to her door. Before going in, she turned back. Hank was still there, watching to make sure she got inside safely. Same as he had 60 years ago after late-night study sessions. She waved. He waved back. Then he was gone, taillights disappearing down her quiet street. Inside, her house was exactly as she'd left it, neat, orderly, comfortable. Her pill organizer sat on the kitchen table. The crossword puzzle waited. Everything was familiar. But June felt different, like something had shifted, opened, become possible again. She pulled out her phone and created a new group chat, Road Trip Crew 2025. Added Millie, Leroy, and Hank. Typed "Made it home safe." Already looking forward to next year. Any suggestions for where we go? Responses came quickly. Millie, Nashville. I've always wanted to see the Grand Ole Opry. Hank, New Orleans. Jazz and beignets. Leroy, wherever we go, I'm driving. Hank's GPS nearly killed us. Hank, rude, but fair. June smiled, set down her phone, and looked around her kitchen. Tomorrow she'd return to her routine, coffee at 6, crossword. At 7, garden before noon. But now routine felt different. Not like waiting for life to end, but like preparing for the next beginning. There would be another road trip. Another adventure. More laughter, more memories, more proof that friendship didn't diminish with age. It deepened, strengthened, became more precious. She thought about Betty's words, the detours are where the real journey happens. This whole trip had been a detour from routine. From resignation, from the quiet assumption that the best parts of life were behind her. And it had led her exactly where she needed to be, reconnected with her past, alive. In her present, excited for her future. Her phone buzzed one more time. Peter P.S. I still have your class ring. Found it in a box of old things. If you want it back, I can bring it to you when we have coffee. June laughed out loud. After 60 years, her class ring. She typed back, keep it. But tell me the story of how you ended up with it. Deal. It's a good story. June, I've got time for good stories now. And she did. Time for stories, for coffee with old friends. And new connections, for road trips and reunions, for saying yes to possibility. She was 78 years old. Her knees creaked. Her pill organizer was full. Her hair was silver. And her life was just beginning again. Outside, a Carolina moon rose over Asheville. The same moon that was rising over Athens and Atlanta, over Harlow and Charleston. Over everywhere she'd been and everywhere she'd go. Tomorrow would bring routine, but next June would bring adventure. And that made all the difference.